Okay, good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to go to the details of discussing how to evaluate an observing site. This was something that Helen and I have been working on of recent for Broward Astronomy to have a place we can invite the public to go look up. So we're working on that. But as usual, first we'll do the news. So the MIRI instrument, the mid-infrared instrument aboard the James Webb Space Telescope, is now cooled down to its operational temperature of minus 447 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 266 Celsius. That's less than 7 Kelvin. They say Kelvins. I think it's just Kelvin, but okay. They're NASA. They're now starting to work on deciding how to present the first thing they want to take a look at, what types of objects and such. So they're mentioning that one of the people that was putting out this press release said, hey, we're working with a gas giant that Tess spotted for us, so we're going to be looking at that. It is a red dwarf star. It's a gas giant in a very elliptical orbit around this red star. So it's going to be an exoplanet that bakes itself and then freezes itself. So not expecting much in the way of life, but if they use the Webb to take a look at this, they'll be able to do spectroscopic analysis of the light penetrating the atmosphere of this exoplanet to try and ascertain the chemistry of it and the temperature. So I don't think that's officially what they're first going to look at. They were very secretive about what they want to look at first because they didn't want any of the YouTubers out there to jump ahead. So they've been holding off, but it's going to be publicly
Not
announced.
just the YouTubers, but also the other scientists somewhere else, not to scoop them.
Well, I think they were much more concerned about the lack of NASA content control over YouTube, because if they actually name what they're going to be doing their first observing on, people will take a Hubble Space Telescope image from 10 years ago and say, hey, look what Webb just saw. No, it didn't. So they're worried about control over the message, and they're being very close to the vest as to what they're going to image first. And they're not even telling the hosts of the Webb first public image events. They won't tell us that until mid to late May. And we'll get the data in June, and they'll go public in early July. So it is what it is. But in any event, if you want to know the latest of the James Webb Space Telescope, you can go to the blogs.nasa.gov/web. And I didn't realize how many capsules going up, capsules coming down are in process at the moment. The Axiom Space folks, the AX-1 mission, that's 4 people, 3 paying commercial astronauts and 1 employee of Axiom Space. They're the ones you see here in the middle. And they are pretty much done with their observing, their commercial science experiments they want to do. And they're going to be coming back. So they're planning their splashdown. Meanwhile, they're planning the splashdown of the NASA astronauts that SpaceX launched. And they're planning the launch of the next astronauts that SpaceX will be launching. 3 NASA astronauts and 1 European Space Agency astronaut. So for those people that think, the ISS is in decline, take a head count there, folks. There's a lot of people aboard the ISS, and as 4 come back, they're sending 4 back up.
11 people now. Right?
Yeah. I think 12 is the biggest number they've ever had up there. But yeah, people going up, people coming down. It's like you got to have a traffic cop for all this stuff. And this is the discussion of the Crew 3 mission coming back and the Crew 4 mission going up. Obviously, they're going to be launching from the Cape. And they tried to put a good spin on it. but the SLS Artemis 1 launch, the wet dress rehearsal, no crew on board. The idea was to fully stack the rocket and then fill it all up with this liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen in the first and second stages and run it to about 10 seconds or less, and then stop the launch just to prove that the rocket could hold the supercritical cooled oxygen and hydrogen for an extended period of time. The problem was they didn't get too far with that because things be a-leaking. They went to load up the liquid oxygen and they got to 49% before they said, this valve's not behaving the way we expect it to. It was a helium check valve. If you remember, once you get to zero gravity, the remaining oxygen in your oxygen tank, your oxidizer tank, kind of floats around in globules. And so you have a small tank of critically cooled helium that you vent into the oxygen tank to pressurize the oxygen to the back of the engine so the engine will function in 0G. This valve apparently wasn't doing its job, so they couldn't fill the oxygen tanks more than 49%. And then they went to say, well, let's cap that off. Let's stop the oxygen fill. We'll start the liquid hydrogen fill. They got to 5% before the umbilicus that connects the ground filling to the launch vehicle sprung a leak. So, yep, dress rehearsal, we're done. Not going any further. And they're now going to assess the state of the vehicle and then haul it back into the vehicle assembly building and tear it all down to see what went wrong. And what's the next step? We'll get back to you with the date on that. But I noticed I was reading this, all the references are to Artemis as, you know, that's the mission. And it was the wet dress rehearsal for Artemis, but there's no references on the public announcements page anymore as to, and what kind of rocket is it that's launching the capsule for the Artemis mission? Oh, that would be the SLS. That's how many billions over budget and, you know, better part of a decade over budget. There's no references to SLS anymore on the public-facing press page. That's interesting. Here's one in the automated search to look for tags that have SLS on them, but in the text itself, there's no reference to SLS. And just so that Boeing doesn't lose their public relations hierarchy stacking position, Boeing is going to have a press conference in conjunction with NASA about the Flight Test 2 mission. If you can remember back to towards mid of last year, the Atlas V launch of the Starliner CST-1000 capsule with no crew on board, they were supposed to launch and then robotically dock with the ISS, never made it to the orbital initial station keeping that would lead it to get to the ISS. Had a slight miscalculation in its orbit and the engines fired erroneously and it never had enough fuel to make it up to the ISS. So they brought it back down. But because that mission failed, they now have a test number 2 mission that's supposed to repeat and do what they didn't do the last time. And the date for that is, we'll get back to you on that. So all these other non-SpaceX launch vehicles are like, yeah, we're having some problems. We'll get back to you on that. And also relating to SpaceX launches, if you remember from late last year, there is a U.S. National Reconnaissance clandestine satellite launch that was going to go up from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. And it's been delayed a couple of times for weather, a couple of times by the National Reconnaissance Office because they wanted to do some touch-up work on their satellite. And now it's been delayed once again to tomorrow because of upper-level excessive winds. You know that thing when they talk about maximum aerodynamic pressure? If the winds are too strong, that increases the maximum aerodynamic pressure, meaning it might jeopardize the spacecraft, or they'll have enough wind resistance that the amount of fuel they have on board won't take it up far enough with the first stage, and they'll have to expend more fuel on the second stage, which means it might not get to the eventual high-level orbit that they were planning. So they'll do a weather delay today and try and launch it again tomorrow. And how does that work? If you remember in the state of Georgia in the US, there's a county called Camden. They wanted to convert a Union Carbide manufacturing plant into a space launch complex called the Camden Spaceport, or Spaceport Camden, depending upon who you listen to. Well, the local environmentalists said, you're going to need a referendum because Union Carbide was not a very good citizen when it came to not polluting the environment at the former Union Carbide chemical plant. And so rather than just sort of ignoring all of the toxic waste that's there and claiming it's now Spaceport Camden, they wanted them to go back and clean it all up before doing that. And they held a referendum, and the people in Camden County said, no Spaceport Camden. So you'd think that would be the end of it. It would be dead after that. No, the Camden County government, not the voters, the government, plus the commercial folks that want to commercially back Spaceport Camden said, oh, we're going to go ahead anyway. Despite there being a 72% decisive vote that the voters said, no, you're going to have to go clean it up before you make a spaceport out of it. They said, no, we're still going to make a spaceport out of it. Now, hopefully they will still clean it up. But at the moment, we're going ahead. Any more news items for today that I might have missed? I know it was very rocket launch and rocket landing heavy.
Yeah. Are they going to televise this landing tomorrow?
The landings, they will usually show you some news media release after the fact, because landings, whether they're on land or at sea, are life jeopardizing. And if something goes wrong, they don't want just anyone spilling the video beans. The launches, even though they're still life jeopardizing, they still want to have live launch coverage. Yeah. I don't get the distinction between the two, but okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe NASA TV will run it or something.
Yes, if it's a NASA.
That is, yeah, NASA Space Now. It's not from NASA. They use the name. Right. You might have better chance because they're commercial. It's a bunch of kids that goes everywhere and they film and comment everything.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to use the meatball in our James Webb Space presentations, but we can use the official NASA-sanctioned Webb logo. But we can't use the NASA meatball or the worm.
Well, speaking of launches, it's the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 16 launch.
Yeah.
They went up April 16.
And they recently opened one of the last remaining dirt samples from the moon.
That's cool that they didn't release the whole thing one time, because you know that as the time goes, we have better technology. I like the way they thought to kind of save some stuff to be observed later with better technology.
I'm the doubting Thomas that says somebody did a space occupancy inventory and said, we got those moon samples left. They're taking up space. We have to keep them in isolation. So we've got some other stuff. We're going to be going back to the moon. We need to like retrofit the isolation lab. So let's get all that old stuff out of there.
Maybe.
I think of that astronaut on that crew. I think Charlie Duke and Ken Mattingly. Are they still alive?
I do not know. They don't write. I don't keep in touch with them. But, yeah. No, it's kind of like the veterans of wars. You have to like, okay, anybody left from World War One? How many are left from World War Two? We've got a few from Korea left. Yeah, there's still a good number from Vietnam. Oh, the war in the Middle East, we've got lots of them. And you know, it just trails off over time. So surviving
If you want to
Apollo
see,
astronauts.
if you want to see some stuff about one of the Apollo missions, I forgot if it's not Apollo 8, I'm not sure. They have a sample of the moon in the middle, on the Broward Central Library in downtown. And they have like a bunch of videos, and they have spacesuits. It's a nice place to visit. It's the 5th floor of the main library in Broward County.
And for those people that think that Stuck in My Brain is only movie trivia, Lovell, Borman, and Anders were the crew aboard Apollo 8. They did not land on the moon.
I'm not sure if it was Apollo 8 or not.
Do you
No,
remember what?
Apollo 8 was the Christmas event where they went around the moon. They orbited the moon.
And what did they say when they came around the other side?
I don't know.
I forget the exact quote, but I think it was Borman because he was the commander.
He said there is a Santa Claus.
Oh, okay.
And,
And we just saw him. He was on the far side.
and the UFO people say that was a secret code, that there were alien bases on the other side of the moon.
Yeah, I have seen that video. Yeah. That was the secret code by the Apollo 8 astronauts back to NASA to say, yeah, we saw that base on the far side of the moon.
Santa's factory.
So
But
there was
we have the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that I believe is still in orbit about the moon, and it doesn't send us pictures back of that.
They had time to dismantle until we had the, mapping of the moon.
If you were really into examining all the pixels, you'd find that there's a certain area of the moon that seems like another area of the moon, and they just replace the pixels.
Well, they do have pictures that look like they've been erased. It's a smear of gray. What did they ever explain what that is?
No, but I've seen the same thing on Mars. The rovers on Mars, when they take pictures of distant, sort of near horizon scenery, you'll occasionally see little places that are smeared. And somebody took a picture of a desert highway in Southern California where there was a gas station along a distant road, and the ground came up just enough where you couldn't see the road, but you could see like the upper section of this old gas station. And people were saying, that's just a picture of Southern California. We're not really on Mars. And you can tell by the fact that they erased out the gas station and left everything else. I mean, I've seen the rough pictures from Mars where you could swear you could see like power line poles at a very regular interval across the horizon.
It's Apollo 7. It's John F. Eisel.
Yes, he wasn't one that landed on the moon, but he had access and could commemorate what went down there. But I think it was his wife that actually did the commemoration because he
Yes, his wife donate everything for the main library.
Yep.
Susan.
But
So if you guys want to see a moon rock and lots of cool stuff about the Apollo 7 mission, that is a free kind of museum, fun.
Yeah. They occasionally throw additional stuff in there.
And the UFO people saw that composite picture of Mars of the lander had its picture of itself. And they said, well, that's fake because you don't see the arm holding the camera. So
That's the alien. That's the alien taking a selfie of the lander.
Please.
So here's a fun fact, as they say. The Curiosity rover can take the individual pictures and then it sends them back to Earth. And on Earth, we have the software that creates the selfie where you don't see the arm. When they did Perseverance, the ground crew said, is there any way we can artificial intelligence automate this thing? Perseverance can actually take its own selfies. So it can take all the individual photos and can find and remove its own arm from the image and send back a selfie.
And if you do that with your phone and a selfie stick, the program removes the selfie stick. So it's the same thing. It's just even if you don't want to remove it, the program already removes it.
It's just a simple piece of software.
So did you see the headline that this 85-mile wide comet is heading our way?
They just want to go by and say hi.
Except it's just going to be, its closest approach will be 1 billion miles from us, and it won't be here till 2031. But of course, the sensational headlines is heading our way. Oh my God! Oh my God!
All right, I'll get my bomb shelter.
Get started building it now.
Yeah.
And I also saw where they're trying to resurrect the threat of the Mayan calendar ending as another doomsday date. It's not the end of the earth again party.
Yes.
If you remember that, the last time they did that.
Like there was a year that we had 3 ends of the world in 1 year. So
and it was by the same group. It was by the same group.
This is not the end of the world party. Yeah. And then this is not the end of the world party again. And then this is not the end of the world party again.
The third time that we did it, we actually put a boast on the promotional page. If you give up your job and you get rid of all your worldly possessions, we will give you free moon cookies and water if you attend our It's Not the End of the World Again party. Nobody took us up on the offer. But I was reading stories about people that, quitting their jobs and selling all their worldly possessions and then the world didn't end, and we never heard what happened.
Oh, we had a pandemic.
Yeah,
almost did.
Yeah.
Well, it ended for a lot of people.
Anything else before we get started? Okay, then. So welcome. Tonight we're going to be talking about evaluating an observing site. This is something that amateur astronomy groups need to do from time to time and need to keep up to date on as light pollution starts encroaching on your favorite dark site. You have to find a new one. I did this several times with the SFAA, trying to evaluate new dark sites for both group outings as well as public events. So we'll get into the details of how that goes, and then I've got a sample site that we're currently working on. So as a group of astronomers, you want to look up, but where do you want to look up from? I'm going to make the assumption that this is not a site that you've already picked out or are already using. This is what you need to learn about in order to select a new site. Like, okay, we've lost our site and now we're looking for a new site. How do we do that? What are the steps we go through to do that? And it's a lot more than just looking for someplace dark or away from city lights. That's just where it starts. So the first thing you have to think about is, what would you like to look at from that location that you're interested in, that you don't even know about yet? If you're doing daytime events, then it doesn't make much sense to go out way in the middle of nowhere for darkness when you're just going to be holding daytime events. If you're going to be doing events just before sunrise or just after sunset, you don't worry so much about the light pollution because the lights aren't on yet where they were just turned off. That normally comes to pass if you want to look for what they call morning stars or evening stars, or if you're looking for satellites before or after sunset. Sometimes you'll have comets that are near the horizon, and you might have to go look for them early in the morning or just after sunset. But typically you'll be looking for the nighttime targets, the lunar, planetary stars, and deep space dim fuzzies, the nebulas and galaxies and star clusters and such. Or if you're looking for a new site because there's a particular event you want to go see that's coming up in the next few months, then you have to pick your site based upon that, because if you want to go see, for example, the transit of Mercury or Venus across the face of the sun, not happening anytime soon, it's a few years off, then you probably want to go see that just before sunrise or just at sunrise. It'll have to be just at sunrise because you won't see the transit if it's when the sun's below the horizon. So that might necessitate you picking a strategic site that's to the east or the west of whatever region in the U.S. you're living in. But in general, you'll be looking for a general use astronomical observing site that's not specific to a particular target or event. Then you have to think about, well, who's your audience? Well, obviously, it's going to be members of whatever group you belong to. That's your folks with telescopes or binoculars or whatever. But it might also be other groups. We'll often go to the National Park Service, the Big Cypress National Preserve, and in the winter months, they'll hold events where they invite all the area local amateur astronomy groups to come out and bring telescopes, and they might get 500 people there on a busy night or 50 people on a not so busy night. But you've got various groups that you have to share the entire site, so it's on a first come first served basis, and you don't want to crowd people, and don't bemoan the fact that you arrived late and we're all the way at the end and you don't get much traffic. And if there is a cost for the site or whatever, you may have to do a group share pay on the price for the site if you have to register, get registration for the site, or you have to pay a public event license. Typically, though, you'll have a couple of instrument participating members within your group, plus some amount of the public. Or like at Big Cypress, we can just have a kind of a free-for-all, multiple groups and lots of public, and they may be from different places, so they might not have heard of your group, or they may have heard of your group, and they want to go look through the telescope of another group that they never talked to before. So mix it up. The events may be highly publicized, in which case you don't have much control over what other groups might show up or how many members of the public might show up. And if it's a really popular event, it's likely going to be promoted by mainstream media or social media, especially if it's things like solar or lunar eclipses, comets or asteroids, or doomsday objects, extinction level event objects that are 1 million plus or 1 billion miles away, and they're not going to happen for another 5 or 10 years. And getting everybody all fired up now. Then when there is nothing noteworthy as an astronomical event, we'll kind of cook up things like, hey, there's going to be a conjunction. Venus and Jupiter are going to be real close together. Actually, no, they're still going to be millions of miles apart. Yes, or Mars' closest approach, the moon will be Mars will be as big as the full moon. Now, if it ever is that big, kiss it goodbye. And so this is the opposite of the conjunction. When you have two things that are in the same sky at the same time, but they're on opposite parts of the sky. So they're really not related to one another. They just happen to be in different parts of the sky. So you can get a 2-for-1. I came out to look for, Mars, and hey, look, I get to see Jupiter at the same time in the other part of the sky. And then when a conjunction's not exciting enough, you can actually have occultations where you might have the moon passing in front of some farther away planet or star, and depending upon exactly where you are along a line on the ground, you can see this 6-minute duration occultation where one thing gets in the way of light coming from the other thing. It's something people do. And then, the postulated end of the world events. Those are always fun to disprove. So if you're picking a site, you also have to think of the environmental concerns about the site. Now, this isn't about things like your astronomers are going to go out there and leave trash, or, people are going to trounce over things, or you have endangered species. This is, you're going to go into an environment that you don't have much control over. Think about it. Dress appropriately, bring the appropriate stuff. So in South Florida, we don't worry much about ice and sleet and snow, but in other parts, you do have to worry about, okay, it's winter time. It's going to be this temperature, and we're going to have 6 inches of snow on the ground. Everybody be prepared. So in South Florida, it might be more like it's raining or it's totally overcast. Are we going to cancel the event? If there's a event hall near the observing site, maybe you can go indoors and do some educational or discussion activities. In South Florida, we do have to be concerned about some things like insects, gnats, biting flies, horse flies, not so much roaches and beetles, but the ever-present, once you're in the Everglades, mosquitoes. It's funny that if we go to sites close to the Atlantic Ocean that are humid and swampy, we get the biting flies, the little tiny black dots that are called no-see-ums. You can see them and they hurt when they bite, but and they're tougher. They drink DEET all day long and do a backstroke in it. But mosquitoes, yeah, depending upon where we go. If we go out in the middle of the Florida Everglades near a swampy lake area, the mosquitoes are so thick that you can wave your hand through the air and feel the mass of the mosquitoes. There's also local animal life you may have to pay attention to. If you're near Everglades water areas, you may have to think about alligators. As long as you don't go splashing in the water or go into their area, they typically don't bother you. But if you're near the more salty parts of the swamp, near the Atlantic Ocean, there are crocodiles. And typically if you see a sign that's posted that says danger, crocodiles, do keep your distance because crocodiles are just nuts. They'll go after anything that moves, even if they're not in the water. But depending upon where you're going, if there's wooded area, there may be snakes or lizards. As Helen and I were almost running over one last night, there can be raccoons and Florida opossums and flying things. You can see bats. There's small fruit bats that fly around occasionally. And then you have to think about the atmosphere itself. If you're near large bodies of water, if it's fresh water, as the temperature drops, you're going to get dew on your equipment. So do bring your dew mitigation tubes or heaters. And if the temperature rises, you can actually have uncomfortably high humidity that will run the public off. It's just too hot. It's stifling, and they leave. And that amount of moisture in the air and heat actually makes it where you cannot magnify your targets as much to get what is commonly referred to as foreseeing. When you go to put 200 times magnification on something, it looks like it's underwater, it's swimming. And then there are the laden breezes. Oh, it's nice and comfortable, it's cooler because there's a breeze coming through. But then you find out that the breeze is actually bringing in fog or dew or salt air, and now you have to worry about how that's going to be covering your...
the Sahara dust that gives you allergy.
Yes, we've had that one as well. Sahara dust coming in from the North African area and making its way across the Atlantic Ocean and deposited in South Florida. And you went out to the site with orange tube telescope equipment, and you come home with orange tube telescope equipment. So you have to clean it off afterwards. But that Sahara dust is typically not that acidic. You get more damage potential from ocean salt air off the Atlantic Ocean because that can affect the coatings on your optics and your aluminum tubing and your electronics, the circuit boards.
And we've been places also that was very dry, even in Florida, that we kind of, fainted out, or like sometimes we are in the concrete.
Yes, if you're doing daytime observing, do bring water, because there are sites you can go to where it gets either very dry and you need the water, or it gets very high in humidity and you just can't take it out in the sun. I can't take it out in the sun. I usually bring along a chair and sit in the shade. And then when you're selecting a site, you do have to think about the tolerances of your group's members as to how well they deal with the public. A lot of times they don't want the public touching their equipment, including the eyepiece, or too many people around their mount will get them skittish and they might bump their mount and they got to do a polar alignment again. They get skittish, so they'll do things like well, I'm not going to let the public look through the eyepiece of my telescope. I'm going to set up a computer and they can look on the display. It's a different way to do it. So skittish members with their equipment, that's their personal treasured property, and bringing that out for the public to come into contact with. Travel time.
Wearing masks too. Yeah.
Well, there's the pandemic things that you have to worry about, putting eyeballs up to eyepieces and those kinds of things. Travel time is significant for some and not so significant for others. I know there are certain amateurs that do astrophotography that don't mind driving 4 hours up to a dark site in north central Florida, but they don't want to drive 2 hours to a site in the Everglades that's darker than their usual site that is only 45 minutes away. So it's a balance. Most of them prefer a day trip, like I can make it out there, leave before sunset, do my nighttime thing, tear it all down, and get back home at a reasonable hour. You know, it's not 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Other times you'll go for a star party kind of event, and it will be all night, or it might even be a multiple day event. You might do a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and leave on Sunday. So you have to think about, where am I going to stay? Do I have to bring my own accommodations? You know, you have to think about that stuff if you're choosing a site that you want to use for more than just a quick one-night thing. Then other parts of transportation are, what's the transportation surface like to get there? Some people don't want to take their vehicles over shell rock roads because, you know, acid, and then they got to clean it afterwards, and they like detailing their car, and you know, or they don't want to drive over grass because they've got a catalytic converter and they're worried about pine needles being set on fire, and they don't want to get too close to you know, places they can't afford to be paved but have gravel, or near the beach you might have beach sand. So you have to think about how you get to where you are, to where you want to be from where you are. And then once you get there, it's parking. Is there room for your attendees to park? Is there room near your setup area where your participants can park so they don't have to haul their hundreds of pounds of equipment a distance to set it up and then tear it down? And then there's pay versus free parking. Some places it's free parking. Other places it's you pay by the hour. And other places it's, I don't care if you're here for 5 minutes or 4 hours, it's $20. Yeah, that can be a hindrance to the public showing up. And then whether or not the area you want to set up is level. A lot of people like, well, can I set up on cement? That would be great. Can I set up on at least asphalt? That would also be great. Versus the people that say, I want a nice sort of a little bit spongy surface because I'm doing long duration astrophotography. So they'll want to set up on grass on top of hard pack. So it's got a little bit of flex to it, but doesn't vibrate like, you know, muck would. And then it's how much cost are people tolerant of? There are some parks that say, I don't care what you're doing in there. Everybody that comes in has to pay the one-day use fee for it. You might be able to negotiate that away by having a special use permit for the site, or maybe a longer-term access contract for your organization. And then you've got the people facilities. You know, people will need restrooms, nice ones. They'll expect them to be up to date, ADA compliant, cleaned on a regular basis, be readily stocked with the appropriate materials and supplies. And if it's not that, it doesn't matter how dark the site is, they may not want to be there. A lot of times you'll find sites that have what are known as campground style dump toilets. And you'll see this in national parks. And if they're maintained, probably not a problem. If you get huge crowds, they can't maintain them fast enough, and it will get out of paper and very aromatic. So you need to make sure of how it's maintained. So it can be really dark, but if it's not habitable by people to the point of the limit of their tolerances, it's not going to be a site you're going to get a lot of attendance at. And if people didn't think to bring their own water or drinks or food, then what's the nearest place they can get some, because they're parched or their children are parched and they're going to need some things to snack on to keep their blood sugar levels up, or water. And then after you get done with your event, everybody wants to go have a lovely discussion afterwards. Where's the nearest restaurant you can go chow down at? Is that, 2 or 3 hours away, or is it 30 minutes away? So you've got an audience to deal with. It's not just your group, it's also the public audience. So you have to balance out these tolerances when you're selecting a site. And then what are you going to do as an activity once you get there? Depending upon, are you just going to be doing unaided observing, binoculars, telescopes with computer displays? Are you going to be having exhibits that you're going to show stuff off? Are you going to be doing projections on a wall or screen? You have to figure out all these things, because that will affect your setup and your teardown time. If it's just unaided binoculars or basic go-to telescopes, 30 minutes setup and 30 minutes teardown, you're probably in good shape. If all of a sudden you say, no, we're going to be doing long duration astrophotography, and then we're going to do processing later, you might want to arrive an hour ahead of time before the event to set everything up. And then you might be there 45 minutes after the event's end to tear everything down. And you have to accommodate how late in the evening is that going to be for your amateur astronomers. And nowadays, people are doing live events. They'll be on Facebook Live from some location. How do they get access to Facebook Live from there? Will they need electrical power? Or if it's a 4-hour event, their phone's not going to have enough battery. If they want to do a live event from there, it's what's the internet access like from there? What's the 4G or 5G from that location? You might want to move closer to a highway where there's a cell phone tower. If you're doing educational stuff, you may need tables and chairs. If you're doing outdoor presentations, you might need a screen or a wall you can project onto and a projector. If you're doing indoor, if the weather turns out bad and you want indoor, you need to find out if there's a nearby auditorium, and does it have furniture you can access, or do you have to pay rental fee for the furniture? That's always a bummer. And then there's the additional time to harangue the auditorium and get your furniture in there and set up and tear down. I've already mentioned the power and internet access. And then there's the space requirements for your participants, the operators for telescopes, and for the attendees and their vehicles. So if you pick a lovely spot that's 20 feet by 20 feet out in the middle of nowhere, even if it has a paved road up to it, the first time people go there and they find there's no place to park, or if they park in the weeds, and it's just not conducive of going back again. So the rule of thumb that I've always worked with is, if you think about drawing a circle, a 2-meter diameter circle around each observing position for your telescope mount plus the operator. That's coincidentally the pandemic separation distance is the same sort of thing. So one person can be at the telescope at a time if you're doing that. But if you're going to have a freestanding computer with processing and a computer display, you may want to up that to 4 meters or 13 feet, because you've got to have a place for the laptop to be sitting on a little table, and the operator will likely want to sit there in a chair while people, look at the display, and it takes more space. And then if you want, bigger things, sometimes people will bring multiple computers or a laptop and then a big separate display. Then you want to bump that up to even larger. And then if whatever point in time at which you're having your event, social distancing for the attendees, where your line that might have been 20 feet long suddenly becomes 50 feet long. And then you have to think about, well, the participants, they want to have their vehicle parked close to their setup site, so it's easy to get the equipment out of their vehicle, set it up, and then tear it down afterwards. So the vehicles are going to need roughly 1 car space equivalent for each vehicle. And then it's going to be, if, let's say, 50 or 100 members of the public show up and you're out in the middle of nowhere, they're going to bring their vehicles. So you need to do crowd and vehicle management. So if you have a small number of participants, it's going to be tough to dedicate someone to do crowd and vehicle management. Sometimes you can have the site host, like the National Park Service rangers. They will do the crowd and vehicle management for you. If you're expecting a large number of people and you've created an event that might have a couple hundred people there, and the site management is not going to do the crowd and vehicle management for you, you may have to have a couple of people show up that just do that and didn't bring a telescope. So your assistant staff, if it's a small number, you can probably do some time sharing of telescope operators to talk with the site management or to do the proverbial bathroom or snack break. But as soon as you get a large number of people with telescopes or a large quantity of public, you're going to want to dedicate somebody to act as the host or liaison to whatever the site management team is. And then there are event traffic flows. As a rule of thumb, I try and tell the astronomers to show up 60 minutes before event start time. But you can suggest that, but they'll show up right when the event starts, and they'll go, well, the event doesn't start until 9 p.m., so I didn't show up until 9 p.m. And then I use 30 or 40 minutes while people are going, hey, are you going to be set up yet? And then they get irritated at being bugged by the public saying, when can I look? When can I look? So try and get them to show up early, get set up so when the event starts, they're raring to go. You have to think about things like which way the vehicles are going to point. If it's the owner of the telescope, they'll likely be smart enough to point their vehicle headlights away from their setup area so that if they have to leave early, the headlights will be pointing away from where the telescopes are set up. You want your guests, your public, your attendee vehicles some distance from your setup area. You don't want any likelihood whatsoever of a vehicle running into a telescope, hitting a person in the dark, or their headlights, blinding everyone that's trying to look through the telescope. The attendees will be doing a lot more coming and going than the participants. They'll show up late, they'll want to leave early, so you want to basically position them at 90 degrees to your setup site. And the reason for that is they tend to sit there in their car with their headlights on, or they don't know how to turn their headlights off. So you don't want them, to avoid the mosquitoes sitting in their car with their air conditioning on with their headlights pointed at you. And sometimes you'll have vehicles as they approach the site with their headlights on, they turn on their high beams because they want to see what's going on. If they're 90 degrees to the setup area, you don't have that problem. And I know nowadays,
if you do set up some event like this, it's always good if you have a website. You can put the participant etiquette. That always helps.
yeah, that's a good one for promotion. Always think about not only having a information bulletin for your members with the telescopes, but also an information bulletin, usually not more than a one-pager in large, bold type, so they can quickly read it, about their etiquette at the site. And we've noticed that at the National Park Service, they actually put up a light barrier. That's a temporary curtain on a wire that they string across so that even if people rotate their cars around where their headlights might be facing towards the telescopes, it'll block their headlights. But they don't think to do that across the road that gets you to the site, and people will sit at the end of the road with their bright lights on going, what's going on down there? And if for some reason your event requires registration or ticketing, you want to have that well before the setup area, maybe even before the parking area, because you may need electrical power, lighting, internet access to process the ticketing, or for people to use their mobile phone to scan a QR code or to have a reader for the QR code for the pre-registration. So think about how you do that. And then there's sharing the site. Everybody thinks about, well, we have to share this with a couple of other astronomy groups. that kind of almost goes without saying, but it should be mentioned. But there are other people that might be using the same site. You don't own the site. You have to share the site with other commercial and public activities. You don't want to block access to the other people doing their thing while you want to do your thing. Some of them will actually be a deterrent. You know, if there is nighttime hunting available at the site, probably don't want telescopes in the dark with maybe red lights on. So you might want to check out, is this site also a place where there's nighttime hunting? We found also that some sites allow nighttime pole fishing, you know, cane pole or reel fishing, and they can have licenses for doing their fishing, and you don't want to be interfering with their fishing because they're out there catching their dinner, food. And there may be other people, other members of the public that are doing things like even at night, boats, airboats, canoes, and kayaks. And if there's boat ramps, you don't want to be interfering with their vehicle or vehicle flow to and from those ramps, even at night. Then we found out at the site we went to, there are other recreational contractors that are also sublet for the site. So even though it's like, okay, the county controls this site, South Florida Water Management District controls the overall area, but they've sublet that out to a contractor who runs an airboat operation there and also has a Everglades animal petting zoo. So you want to make sure that whatever activities you're doing, steer clear of that, because if you interfere with it, you're disrupting their revenue stream, and it will be reported back to whoever let you be there, and you may not be let back out there again. So site sharing. Now comes the part that very few people want to do, and once you get good at it, everybody wants you to do it, and nobody else wants to do it. If a site is controlled by a company, a government agency, or somebody's personal property, you need to negotiate for access and use to that site. You may have to pay an access or a license fee. It may be per event. You may have to pay more if you want free parking. You may have to pay for parking in advance. Think about all that stuff. You may have to negotiate an established term for a fixed date contract. Okay, you want to do 4 events per year. We're going to charge you this much. Therefore, you need to pay annually for all 4 events. Not the best site. There's another slide where we talk about when it's time to say, no, I'll look elsewhere. And try avoiding a payment schedule based upon an unpredictable attendance. In other words, don't pay for 100 individuals to show up, and then you have, because of weather or whatever, only 2 people show up, but you're still paying for 100. So, get real on things like head count. When you're negotiating for a managed site, be it public or private, realize they may have baseline requirements that you have to comply with, and you have no choice in the matter. You just got to do what they tell you to do. In the case of a campsite, you may be told how you can conduct yourself, how far in advance you need reservation, or if you want to have 4 telescopes with operators side by side, you need to book 4 campsites. Cost adds up. If you're holding a large enough event, the property management team, the government park or whatever, may say, oh, if you're going to have 100 people there, you need to sign up for a security crew to be there. That could be a deal breaker right there, because that's going to be thousands of dollars. You may have to pay for site cleanup, or you may have to get some of your members to volunteer to clean up afterwards. If you have an event that might have 1,000 people there, you may have to pay a baseline fee for an ambulance to be on site, just in case somebody gets overheated and has heat stroke. You may have to pay for emergency management service, emergency medical services. So pay attention to that stuff. That's the cost of doing business at that site. One that we're looking at right now is, do we have to have a liability insurance waiver? I looked at this, and anywhere between $350 and $400, regardless of the size of your organization, regardless of the number of members you might have, regardless of the number of people that might show up. That's kind of the going rate, $350 to $400 annually for up to $2 million of event generic liability insurance. And then you'll have to have whoever the owner of the property is to get from you an insurance certificate for as a rider to the event site. With the concerns over security, if it's a government managed site, you may have to do participant background checks. You may have to pay to have photo ID badges made. The attendees, the general public, they'll usually let them in without much scrutiny. But there are sites where you might have to have the members of the public sign a liability release waiver. They're not members, they're not bringing telescopes, but if they're going to be there looking through them, being on the site, then the county or the state may want a liability release waiver signed by them. And then to wrap all of those usage requirements into a nutshell, most city or county or state organization will have what is known as a special use permit. This is where it spells out all the stuff you shall do and any exemptions you have from things you don't need to do. And then you have to sign as a representative of your organization saying, we're going to obey this and do this. But the benefits of that is once you have a special use permit or an event use permit in place, you may get freedoms for things like access gate control. You may get the lock key or a code number to get your team into and out of the site before the event for setup and after the event for tear down. And that's also your way of allowing the public onto a site that's not normally accessible after sunset. You may also get light management. You turn the lights off when you go to set up. You have to turn them back on when you leave. Or you may get a bathroom room key, locked to the bathrooms. You unlock the bathrooms when you go. You do your thing. You set everything up. You have your event. At the end of the night, you're responsible for cleaning up the bathrooms and locking them back up. This one was one that sort of came out of the blue. If you're wanting to use a particular site for your organization's event, not for a public event, and they say, we'll be glad to let you use our site when we're not using it, but in the meantime, you have to sign up to host a couple of commercial private events for us. And you go, sure, we'll bring some guys out with telescopes and let your annual insurance rider convention go through our telescopes for your holiday dinner. And then they break the news to you. We're going to be holding it at this prestigious resort that's really at a dark country site. And oh, by the way, you have to dress like waitstaff. So you have to wear white shirts and black pants and black shoes. And some of your members may go, I'm not doing that. And then you have to very politely disinvite those particular members from doing this. Otherwise, it could jeopardize your use of the site. Things you have to think of. You don't always get everything in your favor. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet. And then the costs you don't think of that are costs for both your participants and your attendees. Tolls. Hey, we like this really great site. It's across this bridge, and there's a $5 each way toll to go over that bridge, and there's no way to get there without going over that bridge. Some people may expect reimbursement. Maybe not the general public, but your members might say, if you want me out there, you're going to have to pay my toll. Same thing for parking. If you go to a site that's nice, but there's a parking fee, your members may not want to pay for that parking and expect you to pay them back. And depending upon the sophistication of the parking at the site, if it's valet parking, or it's a parking garage, or just an open flat lot, or just grassed area, that may vary the parking costs. If it happens to be valet in a garage at a gated site, you may want to find some way of getting that cost covered. And speaking of cost coverage, if you are doing commercial observing because you want to use the site once the events aren't happening, you may be required to use on-site service providers to haul your equipment. and they may expect a service fee and or tips. And then if you're at a site and it's commercial, you may have to pay for power or internet access, like as if you're some, business meeting or convention event happening at that site. So always look for these. I didn't hear about that cost, kind of ancillary costs that could say, well, we're not going there ever again. And now we get to the concept of walking away. Just because a site is dark and it looks really good and is good for telescope setup, if the requirements are not tolerable by your group, you can't keep the cats to stay within the lines, then it may not be a site that you can hold your events at. If the total cost for you to be there as the organization, you have to pay a license fee for the site use, or you have to pay for 3 or 4 campsites every time you go there, or there's a cost for parking, or it's valet, or moving the equipment around, the total cost of the event may be too high. Even if you're charging for members of the public to be there, your return on your investment could be negative if you happen to have a low turnout. You pick a site that's too inaccessible, but you were counting on revenue from the event. You don't get much revenue if people don't show up. And people may balk at going to a place that, if you want a 3-day event, but the hotel in the area is $200 a night, nobody's going to go. And also, if you have competition on the site, not other astronomy groups, but contracted competition or public use competition, it may be a big enough site, just pick another spot within the site. You don't have to be where everybody else is. Maybe there's a nice clear area in another part of that park. Okay, you may get unruly members or unruly members of the public, people that are just not wanting to conform to the requirements that are your rationale for being allowed to use the site.
And then they leave messages on Yelp saying that you're a bitter lady from NASA.
Yes, you didn't like our headlights when we came blazing out you with our 20 Corvettes, all having LED high beams pointing at your astronomers with telescopes, so you get a bad Yelp review. Yeah. So if you are familiar with your own members of your organization, and there's certain things they're just unwilling to cooperate with, tell them right up front that it's not that you're a stickler for this. You don't want to jeopardize your use of the site, so politely disinvite them. It's a dark site. They'd like to go there. Go there some other night on your own, or have your group itself go out there. But if they're unwilling to sign a liability release waiver, or they show up like, I'm not really a member, I'm not really a participant, I'm a member of the public, I just happen to bring my own telescope with me. Yeah, if whoever manages the site happens to see one of these is not like the other, they'll ask them, well, who are you? Well, I belong with them. Okay, if you belong with them, how come I don't show you on the liability release waiver? Or how come you're not wearing your background check badge? It could jeopardize your use of the site. So if you know they're not going to be conforming, let them know in advance. And also let your group know it's a site where these things are tightly controlled, and therefore, if you're unwilling to do it and you do show up anyway and you start misbehaving, we'll ask you to leave. Doesn't make a lot of friends doing that, but it does allow you to keep your 10-year long-term agreement in place. Okay, now to an example. So Broward Astronomy is in the market for looking for a public event observing site. We'd like to invite the public out to look up with us. We need a dark site. It doesn't need to be rural dark. It just needs to be darker noticeably than city light area, and not too lengthy a travel to get there. Easily get there. It's dark. I'm going to leave my house now and drive out there as a public attendee. And you can do that. And I don't want to stay out too late. It's 10 o'clock. I'm going to go home, get to sleep. So you want the travel time, and you want the travel to be, you don't want it to be over 2-lane rural roads to get there with a, canal ditch along one side. The jeopardy is just too high. Nice kind of expressway, interstate kind of thing to get most of the way there, and then a small amount of 2-lane to get into the site. That's good. So we want a place that's far to the west with an open sky to the west, preferably so you can see to the north, Polaris. Basically we want an open sky. Should be a paved road all the way up to the site. No shell rock roads, certainly no dirt roads that have to be periodically resurfaced, otherwise cars get stuck in them. It needs to be a large enough site to accommodate an unexpectedly large turnout. The telescope setup area should be cement or paved asphalt or at least grass on a hard packed surface, not sand, not gravel. There needs to be a short distance from where the telescope owner parks their vehicle to the equipment setup site. There needs to be a simple fee per attendee. So if there is admission, it's like, $1.50 to $2.50 per attendee, kids free kind of thing, or just zero cost for use. They need to have the good local restrooms, contemporary restrooms, not something built in the 1920s, kept clean, well supplied, and not a campground style dump toilet. If you can't have a local store open at night, you at least want some vending machines that can provide you with water, soft drinks, and some kind of snacks. After the event, you'd like it to be a tolerable drive to post-event dining. Less than an hour. Not a couple of hours, but less than an hour. And you don't want any high-cost service requirements, like you don't want to have security on site. You don't want to have to pay a lawyer to review your contract. You don't want to have to pay for sanitation services or porta potties or ambulance services. That's just going to make it where you can't do this ad hoc. And hopefully you'd like to be able to get rid of that burden of the liability insurance cost. So we're working with the Broward County Parks Division on a park that is well to the west of Broward County in the southern part of Broward County called Everglades Holiday Park. Some people may have heard of that. That's the park we're analyzing. So for those people that are not familiar with Southeast Florida, the big red arrow is where Everglades Holiday Park is. It's off of US 27 at the western terminus of Griffin Road. It's below I-75 northbound, so you can kind of see where it's at. A lot of people go, but how dark is it there? I have an answer to that question. Ta-da! This is a Bortle light pollution map from 10 plus years ago. So it's obviously has crept to the west a little bit. Not so much that they've built things to the west, it's just that the stuff in the east has gotten brighter. So the white area is city pollution, city light pollution. The sort of reddish area, reddish-orange area is the first stage of darkness, and the kind of brown area is the next stage of darkness. And this is right on the edge. So if you look to the west part of the park, it's darker than the east part of the park. And as you look at some of the other areas we go to, like Harold Campbell Public Use Area, which is part of the South Florida Water Management District, that one's the next darker. And then as you look at the place we used to call Area 51 because it was 51.5 miles west on I-75 north, that's a site we can't get to anymore because there's a gate that has a lock on it. But that just gives you an idea of where we'd like to be. And you see that big blue sort of tongue up through the middle of the Florida Everglades. That's down at the bottom on US 41 is Seagrave Drive. It'd be dark down there, but it's about an hour and 40-minute drive from anywhere in South Florida. So we do that during the winter months. So here's a zoom up picture of the park, and I put labels on it to show you where things are. North is at the top. You come into and go out of the park on the right on Griffin Road. There's a bridge. To the north off this map is a giant South Florida Water Management District pumping station for that canal along the top. Along that canal, you have those two long boat docks That's for that contractor that has the airboat rides and the swamp buggy rides. And then you see those 3 slots that are 90 degrees to that. That's the public boat ramps. Those are new, and they're open 24/7. And that long white line that sort of goes off to the southwest, that's actually a raised levee that's used for flood control by the South Florida Water Management District. There is a locked gate right about there, just past where it says levee, is a locked gate that you can't get through. And they're going to be using that levee because they want to build a pump station just out further to the west. So those are areas we can't go, and I'll show you why. If you're interested, there's vending machines accessible 24/7, water and soft drinks, but I didn't see any snack food vending. And during the daytime, for daytime events, there's actually a nice little mini mart. The public parking is nice, large number of slots, public parking. The area we'll be in is actually adjacent to the campground area here, and it's where the buses park. You see this, there's no infrastructure, there's just large, long grass areas, and you see a bus parked there. There's another bus down here, another bus down here. This is where tour buses coming to drop people off for the swamp boat rides park the buses. But that's during the daytime. At night, there's no buses there. And since we'll be down here, we're away from everything else. And the restrooms we want are over here on the edge of the camping facility. So if you zoom that up, north is to the top. That large parking area for attending parking is up here. The entrance and exit to the park is up here. The restrooms are here off to the left. And here's the setup area. This is from aerial view. This is from the Broward County Property Appraiser's site. So you can actually see these little orange rectangle areas. Those are low height, very bright white, full cutoff on the bottom, LED street lights, god awful bright. So when we are negotiating for use of the site, we're going to have to say, well, there's no buses at night. We're the only ones that are going to have people there. They'll be to the north parked in the attendee parking area. So can we maybe get you to switch these lights off while we're there doing the nighttime event? You can leave the rest of the lights on in the park. We don't care about that. But around here. So these are some pictures we took in the daytime. So this is that site in the daytime. You can see all the light poles. We're over here in the back corner. This is that levee with the locked gate on it. And that locked gate goes all the way down to the water line on both sides. So unless you're going to jump the gate, there's no way you're going to bring your equipment through. Here's your soft drink and water vending machines. This is the little mini mart. It's open till 6 p.m. Lots of snack foods, water, soft drinks. Over here on the left side, you can see the cases. They have ice cream when you're too hot outside. This is the public boat docks. They're open 24/7. And they have a lot of light. And further down, you can see the airboat ride, swamp buggy ride kind of docks. You can see the lights. And over the area right behind these docks, there's some Florida Power and Light high tension power lines. Some people might be skittish to set up their equipment directly below the power lines. It might, they may have to wear their tinfoil hat. So we're going to set up in a place other than this, and I'll show you why. So we took pictures at night. We went there twice at night because the first time we went there, we thought, hey, there's a large open area, and we'll just set up there. If you can just turn this one god-awful bright light. This light here at night, this is what it looks like in the daytime. It looks very innocuous and nondescript in the daytime until they turn it on at light. And look how much light it's dousing the top of this little shack to the point where you can see dark shade underneath it. This is the light closest to the public boat ramps. But as you get closer to the other boat docks, it just goes on. There's just bright lights all the way down. It looks like this is grass that's well illuminated. This light is a good 100 feet away from where this grass levee is, and it's lighting it up like you can see the individual blades of grass as if it's daylight. So, yeah, We aren't allowed to turn that light off because it's a public boat dock and it lights everything up like daylight, so we wouldn't want to be there anyway. This tree line with these palms and other kinds of vegetation, where we are setting it is on the other side of it. So even if they have these lights on, these lights here and this light here, we're going to be well on the other side of it by 1,000 feet. So here's the actual setup site. There's a paved road. I didn't use the software to merge my pictures together. I just sort of abutted them. So there's a paved road that runs along the edge of it. And this is shell rock that's covered with grass. You can see why the grass is not growing very well. So it's a nice hard packed area. It's dry. And then you see sort of vegetation right along the edge. This is the edge of the park. And then off here in the distance is a large lake they use for draining this area. And on the east side of the park, there's also more power lines, but there won't be any overhead for us. So these are the lights I want turned off. I think there's about 8 of them. So if we can get the lights along this road and the ones right adjacent to the site that are illuminating everything like daylight, this is how I like how bright these lights are. See this shadow right here? That is from this pole right here that you can't see the top of. You see how the light pole creates shade from the pole itself because there's 4 lights on the top of the pole. So the light on the far side of the pole creates shade on the front side of the pole, and the light on the front side of the pole creates shade on the back side of the pole. So that's how bright these lights are. Now, off in the east and southeast, off in the distance, you can see we had complete cloud cover here. So it's really easy to spot the city lights from Hollywood, Florida. But as soon as you went around over towards the Everglades, there's nothing out there but nothing. It gets real dark real quick. Same clouds on both sides, but it's just dark there. And once they turn these lights out, I think it will be more than sufficiently dark. If you're judging a Bortle evaluation, it'll be about between 14 and 16. Not a 20 or 22, but certainly much darker than city. And if you want the actual latitude and longitude, there they are. Spot them on a map. So we did the evaluation. Here's the upsides. It's a great site for travel because anywhere in South Florida, you're less than an hour to get there. It is suburban, which means
Laura, I can show the thingy.
okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment.
What is that?
This is called a sky quality meter. There we go. I spotlighted Helen. This is a sky quality meter. There's generally one of them that one company created that everybody uses. And it has what is known as a pin photodiode in it. And it has a lens on the top. And it measures light coming through. Notice how it's got a red LED display. You point it up at the sky, and then you hit the button, and it will show.
I remove the batteries.
Yeah, you don't have to show the lights, but
so that's basic, like its magnitude. Like even if you look at here, you can see the large number is when it's darker,
right,
and the small number when it's bright. So you can see this moon, and it would be around 17. But we got about that count right there, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's a light meter?
Yes.
It's not quite a light meter. It really is a sky darkness meter.
Yes,
it will only view at an angle up to about 60 degrees vertical, so 30 degrees each direction. And it does automatic temperature compensation of the pin diode, so it's a very highly accurate, repeatable measurement. This is what the National Park Service uses to file their quarterly reports of how dark their skies are, because it's a common standard of measurement. Not everyone needs one of those, but for anybody that wants to be evaluating dark sites, I do recommend looking into getting a sky quality meter or an SQM. So as I was saying, it's darker than suburban, darker than urban, not quite rural, but about the suburban darkness you would expect. We did light quality meter readings in the 14 to 16 range. I know you want a 20 or 22, but beggars can't be choosers. To the west, the sky is open, and we can get down to 15 degrees in all other directions. Paved access to the road, to the site. Very excellent for daytime solar kinds of events. There's the mini mart on site. Don't have to worry about having the lights turned off. There's drinks, snacks, ice cream, and if people get bored looking through your telescope, there are other things they can do. They can go on the boat rides, the animal exhibit, all kinds of things. So if we unexpectedly have a turnout of several hundred people for a daytime event, you might want to put up a couple of 10 by 10 pop-up tents to give people a place to hide from the sunlight if they get too hot. The setup area is in the southeastern portion of the campground near the bus parking area, and it's paved or grass on top of hardpack. There's a short distance between the participant vehicle and their equipment setup. There's zero cost per attendee. This is one of the few Broward parks that doesn't have an admission fee. It'll be good to have a special use permit because if you go there at night, there is a security guard out front who will take down your last name and your license plate number. But there's free parking. The bathrooms were recently remodeled. They're ADA conformant and very nice. There's a daytime mini mart, the snack store. Nighttime, all you've got is vending for water and soft drinks. But the other thing we found out is there's a shopping center that has a variety of restaurants about 30 minutes away to the east along Griffin Road. So that's good if you want to eat dinner before going out there, or if after the event you want to have a fourth meal, late night dinner. Unfortunately, there's no Denny's in the area, so you can't do like really fourth meal. Okay, every site is going to have its issues, its downsides. Being that it's that far to the west and we live in flat South Florida, if you want to do morning comets or morning planets, we also need to pick an east site. And for that, we usually go to the north end of Fort Lauderdale Beach, and local law enforcement recognizes us when we're there. There's not much of a public attendance, just joggers in the early morning wanting to look through our scopes. So that's a very conducive site. We don't even need a special permit for that. For this site, we do need to pay attention to the people and vehicle flow, because other people are sharing the sites for commercial operations. So that's why we'll be down in the southeast corner of the park. Although the farthest northwest parts had the dimmest area, they also have the brightest lights, which they told us we're not allowed to turn those off because they're near the public boat ramp. And we need to avoid the levees. Sometimes a levee is very good for if you want to see a comet that's low to the horizon at sunset. But at least for the time being, we will not be allowed on the levees because they want to build a new pumping station. And because we'll be in the southeast corner where there's bus parking during the daytime, and there's a camping site over to the west, there's really nothing going on there at night. I don't know why they have those god-awful bright white lights there, but that'll be part of the negotiation to see if we can get at least a few of those lights turned off. Most of the restrooms are locked at night. We'll have to negotiate to have them open during big events. There's a security guard on site. We've worked with parks before where when the event starts, they'll unlock the restrooms, and when the event ends, they'll lock the restrooms back. And I found out the reason why they do that is to avoid human trafficking. Yeah. Just goosebumps and shivers. We have to negotiate exemptions for service requirements for things like security guards, cleanup crews, and ambulances and emergency medical services. If we're a small enough event, and if the county is also enthralled by us doing it, then they may exempt us from that. I've had that before. But because we're a vendor in the county's eyes, our participants, our members that bring telescopes, will likely be required to go through a criminal background check, and we need some kind of ID to prove that we've done that. So we may need stinking badges. Hopefully we can avoid the cost of the liability insurance or find somebody who's willing to give us that money. Now, if we were a public nonprofit, the county does offer annual stipends, donations to poor organizations, but by us being a not nonprofit, a for-profit organization, I'm not sure that they would give us such donations. But if we get stuck up against that as a hard place, I'll ask. So, in conclusion, all amateur astronomy groups at some point will need to know how to most effectively scout sites for observing events. It may be that you have a regular site, but you need a different site because it's a particular event or a very large turnout is expected, so you need to research another event. I know we all like to have the darkest site with the easiest access, easy setup, no cost, and with the best bathroom facilities. That's only in fantasies, or if somebody actually builds an astronomy park. So you will need, as the governance of an organization, learn site evaluation skills, how to negotiate and compromise with whoever manages the site, usually a local government entity. And also know that even though the site's, in a dark spot and it has really good access, if there are lights that you just can't get turned off, or if there's a cost you just can't cover, you have to know how to give up on that site and go find another one. Or a location within a site that you'd like to use, but they say you can't, but you can use this part of the park over here. Do your diligence, go evaluate the other part, see if you can use that one, if that's good enough. So we're going to continue negotiation with Broward County Parks. We'll negotiate to get some lights off during the events. We're not going to be bold and say, could you turn all the lights off? Because we know they have things operating 24/7 on the north side of the park, and we're on the southeast corner of the park, and there's probably 60 acres of just space between us and them. So they can have their lights and we'll have our lights off. And, but the liability insurance, if we can't find funding for it, that may be the deal breaker. So are there any other things that we should pay attention to that I didn't cover? Lots of minutia.
You should have showed that picture that I took from you, like 360 degrees.
I did not remember to include that one. I did get back to it. I did that. I know I could have done better, but you saw me. I just stood there. I took the mobile phone and went, shoot, 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 and then I cut them and glued them together.
Yeah, but it's very bright light. I think if we can turn off the bus lights off,
yeah,
we could get around 17 magnitude.
Yes, I think it would be in that range because there's enough coverage around it. Let's go back to the daytime view. Come on, there we go. There. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If we could get those 9 lights turned off at night for the duration of our event, I think we would have a really good site. It's
Yes.
open, plenty of parking, good setup area. There's restrooms right over there.
No dirty roads to drive.
Yeah, it's all paved road to get all the way to the site. Note, unless you want to do a sun pass on the expressway, there's literally no tolls to get there.
Yeah.
Sure, there's a guard at
It's
night.
very nice.
There's a guard at night, but if park management tells the guard, tonight we're going to have the astronomers here, just let them go through. We've done things like that before too. So if you're a good negotiator, if you're a magnanimous negotiator with the county, they're more willing to allow you to do some things under your own governance.
Especially because they like to put one more badge on their investment.
Yes,
Like, oh, we do
this
voting animals and astronomy.
Yes,
So
this is
something
this is an enormous investment for Broward County. They recently spent almost $3 million renovating this park to raise the entire park up at least several feet because the water level was rising in the area. I don't know what would cause the water level to rise. Maybe there's something going on elsewhere in the planet. But
Aliens.
the water level was rising to the point where during rainy periods or during king tide periods, I mean, this park is out in the middle of the Everglades, and the water levels in the canals were getting so high, the area was getting flooded. So when they said, we raised it by 2 feet, I was out there looking. They raised this site by about 6 feet. It's obvious when you look at it. Yeah, the last level that they raised it by is about 2 feet, but from the shoreline, they raised it about 6 feet. So
the levees are very high. I think
Yeah.
the levees are what? How tall? I think the levees
8
are
feet.
taller than you.
the levees are 8 feet above the current ground level. So they've even raised the levees. So this is a huge investment for Broward County to have renovated this park. They have enough attendance, enough use, enough contractor payments that they want to do things here to prove that the money that they spent of the county taxpayers' money is something that benefits the public. And our astronomy activities on a good event in the daytime, like a solar partial eclipse, can be 5,000 people over a 4-hour period. They love that. At night, we can have a few hundred people there. They love that because it's just the general goodwill with the public that there's one more thing the park can do for recreation, and they can put that on their website says, and we do astronomy here. Hopefully they won't dumb it down and say, we do stargazing. Yes, they do that, but sometimes we gaze at things other than stars because stars in telescopes, unless you're looking at a double star that's colorful, are boring. You can be looking at a globular cluster. There's hundreds of them, or thousands. So anything else about evaluating observing sites or about Everglades Holiday Park itself? Okay. Any questions before I stop recording? Or anybody has a question that they want to say until I stop recording?
Crickets. You need the sound effects, Monroe. You need to have like a little part of the creak, creak. Yeah, you need the cricket, and you need the sound like for like space things, like for crazy hypotheses.
Seemed like a very thorough analysis.
That's what I like to hear. And I even have some hyperlinks if people want to learn more about it.
And
if I get around to it.
We are not doing that anything. If you have people that is not from Florida and they have never seen the Everglades, like do this one time. It's really super fun. Bring earplugs, but it's fun because they show like the Everglades, we go with the boat. So it's a novelty. One more things that you do in Florida that you don't do anything anywhere else in the world.
To give you an idea of how the crossover money works, if you arrive at a Fort Lauderdale Airport passenger terminal and you're in the baggage claim area, you will see signs that promote airboat rides at Everglades Holiday Park, animal exhibits at Everglades Holiday Park. You can actually buy a tour bus position for you and your family where you can be taken from the airport, driven out to Everglades Holiday Park. You do your airboat ride, your animal event, you get to see the Everglades, and then they'll take you back to the airport. So you could literally fly into Fort Lauderdale from someplace else for a one-day event and then fly back out that evening. So there's a lot of promotional money by Broward County because Broward County operates Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, and they also operate in the Parks Division, Everglades Holiday Park, and there's a contractor that pays for having his recreational event there, and he gives a little money back to the county for contracting there. So it's a hand and hand kind of thing.
What would it cost for that?
I have no idea because I've chosen not to do those things because It's very noisy. I've seen alligators before.
I've done that one time, but it's like 15 years ago. So I
I'm
even
sure
drove my mom crazy.
it
'cause
might be it might be $30 to $50 a head, something like that.
I don't remember how much it was, but I went to the animal encounter, and I had like a gator, and I took a picture like holding the gator like this to show my mom to drive her nuts.
And you've also done the same thing with caiman at Museum of Discovery and Science.
Let's say that whenever some animal that my mom is gonna freak out, I hug the animal and then I take a picture to show her.
Did that alligator have a tape around his mouth?
Yep.
No. The alligator they had for her was a very small alligator. But
Yeah, it was a small one.
Yeah, the caiman
baby.
at the caiman at Museum of Discovery and Science, they keep them in water that's just warm enough to keep them docile, and they're small caiman, they're little tiny ones. So yeah, they generally
Yeah, but I've seen kids actually grabbing the glass and trying to touch the gators.
You don't want to do
little
that. No, you don't
kids
do
with
that.
the
No, you
tiny
don't do
little
that.
fingers. It drove me crazy just to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
I actually, pay attention to your kids. They will lose a finger.
Yeah, they will. Or these snapping turtles. Yeah.
Oh yes, like the glass is very high, so the kids
the kids
needs to
climb.
go up on the concrete and go up. It's like it's taller than me. If I want to reach, I couldn't.
Yes.
But they go up on the concrete and
Yep.
then can reach. Like the parents put the kid there.
They put the kid up there so he can get a better view. And then when the kid starts climbing over the top, they kind of just ignore it. They don't go, get down from there, as they should.
It's like they're dangerous animals.
Yes. Okay. Absent any questions, I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.